Hello, and welcome back to Outspoken, our monthly conversation series where we are bringing bold voices together to unpack the issues shaping our lives and our liberation. I'm Dr. Regina Davis Moss, and I am honored. And I guess I want to tell you, I'm so excited about today's episode. It's called Stand Up, Speak Out, Masculinity, Power, and Reproductive Justice, because I think it's such an important conversation that we need to have. Too often, reproductive justice is treated as a women's only issue, but at its core, reproductive justice is about rights, it's about power, it's about autonomy. That's the power for people to make decisions about their bodies, their families, their futures, and that includes men. But for whatever reason, we rarely have open conversations about where men fit into this fight. And so that need is becoming more increasingly urgent right now because we are seeing more and more of this conversation and this rise in regressive ideologies about gender and control. So we have to ask, what is men's role in this fight? And what does true accountability look like, not just in public, but in private? So I am so excited today. We're going to dig into a very good, great, thoughtful, bold conversation. We're going to unpack what it means for men to truly show up for reproductive justice for themselves, for the people they love. And we're going to talk about things like patriarchy. How does it harm all of us? How does faith and identity, can those be sources of resistance? And what action looks like beyond the hashtag? I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible voices. Conscious Lee, you know him all too well, and Reverend Mykal Slack. They are challenging toxic norms. They are reimagining what liberation looks like, and they are doing it in very different ways. I want to start with a quick round of introductions. And Conscious, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what fuels the work that you do.
I'm George Lee, aka Conscious Lee. Don't forget the Lee. You can find me on the consciously.com. My motto is education is elevation. My pronouns are he, him. You feel me? Educator, advocate, influencer. My work sits at the corner of power, domination, and thinking about different institutions and systems and how they impact Black life. I like to use pop culture and politics to push conversations about power and domination and how Black people are positioned in that. I have a master's degree in adult and higher education and a master's degree in human relations. And I'm really looking forward to having a real explosive, inclusive conversation with, Mykal today.
Great. And here you are going to see that Reverend Mykal Slack has joined the conversation. Reverend, please just tell us a little bit about who you are and what fuels the work that you're doing.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. Again, my name is Reverend Mykal Slack. I use he, him pronouns. I am a Southern queer trans Unitarian Universalist minister. I'm the community minister for worship and spirit care for a really beautiful community called Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, or BLUE, BLUU. Our work has been since 2015 to really uplift the lives of Black Unitarian Universalists. If you're not familiar with Unitarian Universalism, we are a faith movement that really believes, regardless of what your faith journey is, how you begin in that journey, what your faith looks like, even if you don't use that word, really what it means to put love at the center of all we do, and what it means to put relationship at the center of all that we do. And so that is what really fuels me, the relationships that I have built over the years in this ministry. I'm an ordained UU minister, and it just feels really beautiful to be in community with folks, to help folks understand what it means to be Unitarian Universalist in the world that we live in right now. And so I'm really excited to be here. I'm also a dad of a 9-year-old, recently turned 9-year-old daughter. And so this work is really important to me.
Wow, thanks. So glad to have you. Let's get right into this because we've got a lot of conversations and I want to save time for the audience. They may want to put in some questions in the chat. Please feel free to do so if there's something that you want to hear. To kick things off, I want to talk about this growing concern we're hearing. Younger men, particularly Gen Z, are being pulled toward traditional or even these sort of regressive ideas of masculinity. And what I mean by that, I mean like emphasizing traits like
Accessibility
toughness,
shortcuts.
dominance, aggression,
Use the tab key to
emotional,
navigate and press
emotional
space to
suppression,
pull in options.
and the devaluation of women and LGBTQIA individuals. Let me just repeat that again because we heard some things coming in. When I talk about regressive ideas of masculinity, I mean things like toughness, dominance, aggression, emotional suppression, the devaluation of women and LGBTQIA individuals. So these are, we know, are often being shaped by these online influencers or right-wing political rhetoric that we're hearing right now. And it's tending to pull people away from things like gender equity and collective care. Some of this is real, some of this is overstated, and some of it is a media narrative. But whatever it is, it's shaping how people are viewing young men in their roles in justice movements. So, Conscious, let me start with you. How are you seeing this play out in your own work and in your communities that you are talking to? And how do you think reproductive justice should respond? And how should this movement respond to this?
First, I want to say, Mike made me look bad. I ain't think about it. I'm also a father, you know what I'm saying, a husband as well. I should have mentioned that. When it comes to how I think there's an outright pipeline that is very intentional about recruiting men, young men specifically, especially young Black men. I think that when you start talking about how different men feel like they are being looked over or feel like they're being oppressed or feel like they are, you know, getting the short end of the stick when it comes to progression, this is the way that I feel like these conservative values kind of seep into getting young, naive men. It starts off with thinking about, do you want to become, you know what I'm saying, more masculine? Do you want to be more manly? You know what I mean? Do you want to lift weights? Do you want to learn how to get women? Then you start getting into, you know, a little bit of Jake Paul, a little bit of, you know what I'm saying, maybe a little Kevin Samuels, maybe a little Andrew Tate. Then all of a sudden you full blown, you know, right wing KKK, Ku Klux Klan supporting type things. I feel like the way that it appeals a lot of times is by being able to appeal to the insecurities of a lot of young men, specifically when it comes to how I think patriarchy is a lot of, how I say this. I think that a lot of men of color have a very privileged relationship to patriarchy, where we try to take up different positions that's not really afforded to us many ways, but we fight to have them anyway. And as a result, you see what I'm saying? They cause violence to other people, but we're able to kind of cause, I feel like, some trauma bonding. A lot of dudes, I feel like they really got picked on when they was young, and they got excluded from, quote unquote, the good old boys club by other men. I believe that the men, they went to therapy, they'll be able to heal the young boy in themselves and make it where they're not overcompensating for validation, for acceptance. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to trying to appeal to, they call it simping. You feel me? They say simping is when you try to appeal to women and you're trying to get something from women. I think of the term dimping. You know what I'm saying? D standing for what you think it stands for. But I think that we should account for a genre of content that looks to appeal to men at the expense of women in order to say that they are more masculine or they're high value. And I think that's how it appeals. Some of the counter narratives that's kind of, I feel like, been able to seep through is how some young men really care more about being a thinker more than they care about the other things. And as a result, their critical thinking has gotten them out of the more the old archaic ways of being, you know what I'm saying, caught up in sexism or patriarchy. And not to say they're not sexist or patriarchal, it's just talking about the way in which they are being like critically thinking about how they implicated in it.
Yeah, you said something that I was really interesting. You said, you know, we're putting on these narratives that don't really belong to us. Why do you think that that's happening? And are there any counter narratives that you or people that you know or heard of that are resonating with Gen Z and younger men?
I think that I feel like there are a lot of there's a lot of young Gen Zers and millennials that have taken heed to people like bell hooks and really thinking about how masculinity, and particularly Black masculinity, is structured or positioned within, you know, white supremacy. I think people like Just Wayne. I feel like there's a lot of content creators. You feel like I can think of Political Plug, Perfect Profit, Too Raw, Too Real.
Mhm.
I feel like Black men that appeal to different, younger audience that perform masculinity and perform, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like we be thinking about Michael being very intentional, perform a particular type of cis masculinity that resonates with individuals that's not structured around being aggressive or being around, you feel me, rejection and all that. It's like really structured around how can I be a human and how can I really be more accepting of humanity. The last thing I'll say in this response is something that really resonated with me when I was young. I was 19. Name was Joan Morgan. She wrote When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost, like a hip hop feminism.
Remember that?
One of her chapters, she's talking about feeling like a slave of a slave. And the time I heard that is when I was really on, like I would call it a civil rights high. I was really like on my Black man, Huey P. Newton, Stokely Carmichael. That's what I was really like eating up. You see what I'm saying? This work right here made me think about oppression in a different way and thinking like, all right, as a Black man, can you say you are against oppression when it comes to your community if some people identify you as the oppressor inside the community? And that's something I really sit with even as a 34-year-old, you know what I'm saying? So, I feel like those have been ways that we've been able to appeal to that critical thinking.
I love that, because too often the conversations we're having, they're trying to pit Black women and Black women and Black men against each other. When in reality, our liberation is deeply interconnected. And so this really shouldn't be about a battle of the sexes. It really should be a shared fight for, our autonomy and liberation. Reverend Slack, I want to bring you into this conversation. That question that I just asked Conscious, which is, are there any counter narratives that you are seeing that are resonating that you want to lift up? And then also, let me just stay with you and offer this other question, which is, what are some of the, what's at stake if we don't disrupt these narratives or intervene in how young men are being socialized today?
Well, I think the trend that you were talking about, I think it plays out in all the ways that it always has, right? And how we teach men and boys who to be and how to be in the world, and suggest the men and boys what is or isn't important, or what should be important. I know you touched on some of that quite a bit in what you were talking about in terms of how we socialize folks. Toxic masculinity is real. It always has been, right? And how we uphold and understand that makes a big difference in how folks think of themselves, how men think about and their role in supporting the rights of people who aren't like them, right? This happens often when we think about, even when we think about uh, uh, Democrats versus Republicans, Christians versus folks not. There's a particular narrative relative to conservatism. There's a particular narrative relative to Christianity, and what really matters is that that we're really intentional about recognizing the fact that a conservative Christianity isn't the only Christianity, right? How you showing up as a man this particular way relative to toxic masculinity isn't the issue. And the only way to do that is to really educate folks around that and how we do that, and who does it, right? I think it matters as a minister how I show up in the world as a man relative to patriarchy and toxic masculinity. I have to be willing. I have to be willing to say that this is not how I want to live as a man in the world, and to teach other boys how not to exist in that way. Like, it really matters that we be willing to speak out and to say the things that matter, and to educate ourselves. But if we're not willing to do that, then then that trend will continue. Right? This isn't old. This isn't new. This has been going on since the dawn of time, and it's up to us to really shift that narrative in really public ways. That's the best way to do that.
You talked about shifting the narrative. Like, is there anything that gives you hope that this can actually shift? Because it's looking pretty bleak right now. Neither one of you.
It is looking pretty bleak right now. Yeah, one of the things that we uplift in Unitarian Universalism, is OWL, which is Sexuality and Relationship Education. It's OWL for our whole lives, and it really gives me hope. It really teaches children of every gender about what it means to exist in the world in a healthy way, what it means to exist in the world in an accountable way, how to be in relationship with people, um, how to understand sex and sexuality, recognizing that your body is one body, that all of us have a body, that all of our bodies matter, right? Educational tools like Owl give me a lot of hope, and how kids are invited to enter into that education, I think, is really, really important. And what we do with that education once our kids get through Owl, how we continue to uplift and uphold those ideals, is something that actually really gives me a lot of hope. I think she might have been 7 at the time when she went through her initial kind of Owl training. Even teaching young kids as young as 3 and 4 and 5 years old, what it means to what it means to be in relationship with other people with bodies is kind of magical. It's education I didn't get as a kid, right? And I think it really matters. I also think there's work to be done relative to what it means to have the kind of body that you have as a trans person. Um, we talk a lot about the sort of the transgendering of the politics of recognition, right? Like recognition all by itself isn't enough, right? Politically, but it really matters that folks have a true understanding that every body has a place and our care matters, and how we continue to uplift that really makes a big difference.
Okay. So, Reverend, you are going in and out and you are saying some really important stuff. So I want to turn the conversation to Conscious for a moment. I wonder if you could just try to come back and connect or the mute and try to come back in. And then we'll move to you, Conscious. Any response to that question about, hope that we can shift the tide?
I mean, sometimes I would left with his hope, but being real, I think it's an informational war going on, and it's really a lot less bleak than it is in reality. You know what I mean? I feel like right now the people with the loudest microphones, that's the most persistent in using that microphone, they able to capitulate their reality. But in general, I feel like it's more people that understand that you know what I'm saying, they can't piss on our leg and tell us it's raining for too long, and we smell it. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like right now, just when it comes to propaganda, when it comes to create narratives, when it comes to storytelling, I just think the opposition is just better. They are better at appealing to people's, you know what I'm saying, dispositions, their insecurities, their feelings, their emotions. They better at creating narratives that touch everybody, whether you know what I'm saying, dropped out in 8th grade or you got you know what I'm saying, a diploma. You know what I mean? I think it's those individuals is who the opposition is being successful at being able to impact. So for me, as a teacher, you know what I'm saying, and being hopeful is that I think I'm a better teacher than them. You know what I'm saying? I think I'm better at making messages resonate with people I want to impact better than them. The question right now is how intentional am I being and how persistent am I being in relationship to them? And right now, shit, I'm losing. I'm sorry. I don't know if I can. I apologize.
Absolutely. You can do that.
That's what I think.
Yeah, you said so much there. God, I want to figure out how I want to take this conversation. So, number one, you made me think about this notion of incels and how there's a whole embracing and celebration of incels. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but also you were talking about, being performative, because it's one thing to say the right things. It's another to live them, especially when the dominant culture is rewarding men for staying silent, because that's how you stay in power. So I wanted to see if you wanted to touch on this notion of like really embracing this and, incel thing, but also, your personal experience, as you have grown in your consciousness, like what did you have to unlearn? What did you have to relearn?
I feel like as a cisgender man that come from Bryan, Texas, I had to really sit with how domination and power excluded me and how domination and power included me. And the older I get, the more I think about and negotiate and sit with how I've been seduced by power, but also how power has acted on me. I had to unlearn the ways that I had to unlearn the ways that I wanted to appeal to my homeboys to speak truth to power. I started doing college policy debate when I was like 19 years old. And it took me like 5 years in order to get out of my own way and in order to not care about the ways in which my homeboys would accept me and or berate me and or judge me when I started talking about women's progression and trans right uniquely. So the things I had to unlearn is willing to like it is okay. I'm not for everybody. It's okay. People gonna disagree with me. I debated. My first real job was as a debate coach. You know what I'm saying? My first job that I'm real proud of is, you know what I'm saying, me being the director of a debate program that I was able to win a national championship.
Wow.
And so me bringing that up, I was disagreed with for a living. Once I internalized that and understood it, it's like really I'm a debater and feel like I can whoop anybody. You know, intellectually, I think I can wipe the floor with anybody. I wholeheartedly believe that. Now it's a question of, do I think I had a time to deal with you and or, you know what I'm saying? Do I think what I'm saying is more is outweighs how you're gonna respond to me? I made a living out of calling white people out on their privilege. I made a living out of beating white people and talking about systems and institutions and how they are positioned by power and how they want to stay silent and how it's easy for them to try to look good to me and try to teach me and show me they're a good white person. But it's harder for them to go take it to their lunch table or take it to their, their family members. When I think about being an ally and breaking through being performative, I think about staying implicated in like my maleness, you know what I'm saying, in my manhood, but also still being real about, hey, I read a whole bunch of feminist literature. But if Regina said, hey, Lee, what you said was sexist, I wouldn't be like, shut up, Regina. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't do that. I would try to hear you. I would hear you out and really internalize what you're saying, because I know I can't unlearn away my position. But I can unlearn the way that I am blind to how I can actualize oppression on the people that I think about. You know what I'm saying? Something else that I feel like I've started to be very open about is I'm gonna go somewhere with this. I've recently been diagnosed with bipolar type 2, right? I'm also ADHD, or diagnosed with ADHD. My therapist tried to tell me that. But in me thinking about neurodivergence, when I think about the incel in general now, well, knowing what I know, there are a lot of individuals that have been excluded due to, you know what I'm saying, ableism. If you think about it, it's a we don't talk about this part about the incel community. A lot of people appeal to the incel community, or incel community appeal to them because they created a home for these for particular individuals. Nobody else went to create a home for them. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of neurodivergence uniquely that, you know what I'm saying, that swirls around within the incel community. And I feel very comfortable saying this as somebody that's, you know what I'm saying, neurodivergent, right? The way in which being seen as asocial or being seen as socially awkward, and the way that picks up on the opposite sex specifically, you know, causes you some people that feel like they're being stigmatized. You know what I'm saying? And this is me trying to give not like necessarily like humanity or I mean, but I feel like understanding to how the incel community is structured and how it operates. So I do think that, you know what I'm saying, like people believing they are involuntarily celibate, you know what I'm saying, believing that women are supposed to be objects that they are supposed to be pleased by. That's real. You see what I'm saying? But it's something I feel like that comes before that, and how they able to get. I feel like somebody put a battery in their back and tell them you be a man by telling women they bitches and hoes and by treating them like objects.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then I think where we go wrong with it is that we stop seeing the humanity in the women. You hit it right on the nail, that they become objects. We're still waiting for Reverend Slack to come back in. I want to, I know you have some of your folks listening to this, so I want to define reproductive justice before I ask this question. So reproductive justice is the right to decide when and how you expand your family, if you want a family. It goes beyond this conversation about abortion, because there's 12 Black women 30 years ago realized that you can't have a conversation about the right to abortion without thinking about all the other things Black women have to contend with when they think about whether or not to continue a pregnancy. Number one, we were trying to make sure that we weren't being sterilized. We wanted to have babies. We didn't want you to tell us how many babies we could have, just because for maybe a short period of time, we needed public assistance. And so it really does look at all of that. And then it also takes into account, once I have the child, I should have the resources, the opportunities, and the power to raise that child in a safe and sustainable community. So my child shouldn't have to breathe, polluted air. We should have clean water. My son shouldn't have to be over policed. I should be able to, rest assured that he can get home and, walk to the store without, having to confront law enforcement. So all of these things tie into reproductive justice. And the last I would say is the right to sexual expressions and to love who you want to. All of that, taking all of that into account, what are some myths about masculinity you think would be most harmful to reproductive justice? And what would a liberatory masculinity look like to you, Conscious?
I think one of the harms that always happen is we only view reproductive freedom, reproductive justice as just a pure women's issue. And this is I feel like Mykal gonna be able to speak for himself in terms of trans men that are directly impacted by a lot of these restrictive policies. I also think that cisgender men, myself, you feel me, and other cisgender men, we should be a part of the conversation in ways where we listen. But not only where we're listening, but we're thinking about how we're active participants in either how individuals get their reproductive freedom or how they don't get it. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's really being able to always broaden the conversation and thinking about how Black women are impacted by reproduction specifically, and thinking about how it's not just abortion, thinking about mortality, you know what I'm saying? Thinking about fibroids, thinking about, all of access to healthcare, you know what I'm saying? Especially when we think about in the world where we're going to force individuals to carry out full-term pregnancies. It's also thinking about, to me, all the obstacles that get in the way that make it where Black women end up being the demographic of individuals that are, losing, their lives, due to trying to give birth. For me, a lot of men, a lot of my counterparts don't like being seen as weak. Don't like being seen as if we easily to be dominated by other men. Because we've been socialized to view being empathetic or sympathetic towards a woman's issues is something that gets us dominated, or something that sees us as bad, something that makes us see as weak. A lot of us don't want to get into that. You know what I'm saying? I think some of us are cowards. We rather, you feel me, shit on Black women uniquely than really challenge, our counterparts. I think that's us. A lot of us, don't care to have the range and just really don't care about, what women go through outside of how they're able to pleasure us. As a result, I feel like on my platform and using, my voice, I try to push the envelope in how we think about reproductive justice, reproductive freedom, and really, to me, like really be a stickler when I say that word and a person automatically respond talking about abortion. I'm on you. I'm on you. I'm on your ass. I'm on you.
Yeah,
now.
we appreciate it.
I'm on you now, because now I understand that you don't think for yourself, and I think that you have a very you have a very small limited view. When I say reproduction, you automatically think of abortion. You know what I'm saying? To me, it tells me that you have really been educated by conservatives where you look at reductionism. You know what I'm saying? And to me, I think about, if you want people to, you want to take abortion off the table, let's still have a conversation on reproduction freedom. And just like they don't understand how to capture that. As a teacher, I try to not be a debater sometimes and try to sprinkle some, some game. But I know in terms of the pedagogical process, a lot of times students have to be open, or individuals have to be open, to wanting to learn. And sometimes we ain't really open to learn and debate. I know whether you want to learn or not, the exchanging of ideas, you're gonna learn something, whether you got to take an ass whooping to learn it, or you're gonna be open to hear out the argument. It don't matter though. You still gonna learn today. And it's just try to be mindful of that. But now I'm just ranting. Mykal is back. Shout out to you.
All right. Great. I'm so glad you made it back.
Me too.
What we were talking about is power, masculinity, and accountability, and really what it takes to shift from performative allyship to real accountability in this fight for reproductive justice. So the question was, what are the myths about masculinity that are most harmful for reproductive justice? And in your mind, what would liberatory masculinity actually look like if we could actually get there?
My goodness. One of the primary things that we learn often relative to masculinity is that reproductive justice doesn't apply to us. That it doesn't apply to us, and it's not true, right? Reproductive justice is about recognizing the value of all of our bodies, whatever our genders happen to be, right? And so part of the new narrative needs to be that this isn't, that yes, this is in fact about the more traditional understandings of reproductive justice, yes, sure, this is about women's health. This is about what it means for women to have body autonomy. This is also what it means for people of every gender to have body autonomy. What it means for all of us to have access to health care. What does it mean for me as a trans person to feel like I can go into a clinic and get care with the body that I have, right? That is also reproductive justice, and I am also a man, right? We have to shift how we understand what reproductive justice means, if we're going to understand how we can be fully accountable to that work in the world, right? Um, and also, I think this understanding about who we value and how we value people, right? Like, what does it mean? I think we often don't get taught, as a general rule, much less relative to reproductive justice. We often don't get taught what it really means to show up for somebody else, like what it really means to show up for somebody who doesn't look like you, act like you, exist in the world the way you do, right? We are still a very very much an individualistic society, and so what I need for myself is what actually really matters most. It- it- yes and no, right? It matters that we are each caring for ourselves, our bodies, our minds, our spirits in whatever ways we need to. But what does it mean to show up for the person who's sitting next to you, who might have a gender different from you, who might understand the world different from you, right? It actually means being in relationship. This is how you be accountable. You understand what it means to be in a relationship with someone who might be different from you in any number of ways, who is going to be different from you because we're not all cookie cutters of each other, right? Like, how do we understand how to do that well? Building relationship, understanding how to communicate well with somebody who may not speak your language, right? All of this stuff really, really matters, if we're going to show up well for people if we're going to show up for people in any number of ways, but especially relative to reproductive justice.
Wow, thanks for that. So the other question I asked Conscious was, like, if was there anything that he personally had to learn or relearn? And then, if you could take a moment to speak to like the forces in the church and how they might reinforce these lessons.
Oh my goodness, the church is
Yeah.
hard. The church is hard. I say that as a minister. Like, the church is a hard place because all of those notions of patriarchy get
Yeah.
reinforced in all kinds of ways, right? In terms
Mhm.
of who should be a leader, in terms of who should have the biggest, who people presume has the biggest voice. I saw a reel recently. A black woman was, and I can't remember her name, was talking about how she might introduce herself as the minister of a church in a setting where there are a lot of people, and someone will still ask her, well, yeah, but who's the senior minister?
Mm,
Because clearly it can't be you,
yeah.
right? The preconceived notions that we have about who gets to be a leader, who gets to have authority to speak, on behalf of your particular faith, or who gets to speak on God's behalf, is really tough and really troubling, and has been going on for generations. And so it takes deep, deep, deep work to undo that, right? I think one of the things that I had to learn, I wasn't socialized as a man, right? I had to pick up all of the things that I managed to pick up, some of which I realized pretty quickly I needed to put back down. Right? Like,
Mhm.
I actually, early in my early days of transition, it's like, well, if I'm going to be a man, then I have to be like this or that or the other. It's like, no, I actually get to decide the kind of man I want to be. And I think that's a good message for every person who is male identified in this world. Like, you actually get to be the man you want to be. You don't have to be dictated to. It actually gives you more power to get to decide how you show up in the world, and who you're going to support, how you're going to care for yourself, how you're going to care for your people, and how you're going to be invested in the lives of people you don't even know, right? And that was a really good lesson for me, in the early days. Another big lesson for me was I actually had to think about, like, what it means to have a voice, and when to keep my mouth shut, like, not just when to talk but when not to, like, really when to listen. um, in our movement, in blue, in Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, uh, I think the vast majority of the people in that community are actually women. And so I have to think all the time about, like, what does it mean that I am in this role as minister? Like, what ideals am I perpetuating by being a man in this role? Um, how do I dismantle some of that? Like, it really means being invested in the leadership of people who have a gender that is not mine, right? There are all sorts of little ways that I have to learn how to show up, that I have to learn how to lean in or lean back. And it's complex and it's complicated and it takes paying a lot of attention to people who aren't you, to know how to share space. And part of that sharing of space is being accountable to how you show up in the space.
Wow. Thanks so much for number one, sharing your personal joy journey, because as we know, like real transformation, it starts with our stories and sharing
That's right.
stories. Um,
That's right.
you said something I want to pick on when you said, a lot of times it's women in the church that are the center of things, and a lot of times when we look back in the movements, it was women in the church that were in the center of those as well. Like a
That's
lot
right.
of times it was the place for us
That's right.
in terms of power and where we could use our voice despite the sexism that we still sometimes have to endure
That's right.
in the faith system. There's two things before I want to, because I want to continue this conversation around Christian theocracy, but we did get a question about books. Some of the viewers want to become more educated, which we always love that, right? So we're going to chat some books, more books about reproductive justice, but I wondered if there are any other books that you want to call out and recommend to some of these people to read.
Oh goodness, there are not necessarily specific to reproductive justice, but um, but but honestly, anything that Bell Hooks writes, go read.
Mhm.
um, there's actually a really beautiful human who I have deep respect and love for. His name is Brandon Rencher.
Mhm.
Brandon was out of Greensboro, North Carolina. I don't know if Brandon is still there, but he co-wrote this book called Liberating Church.
Mhm.
That is a really stunning. It's like a manifesto on what it means to show up as as a religious person, to show up as a spiritually grounded and rooted person
Mhm.
in the world that we're in right now. It's actually a really really powerful and special book, and so I've actually been encouraging people to read it. Um, yeah, especially, if you happen to be someone who is faith rooted in any way. I think it offers some new ways of thinking about church, new ways of thinking about relationship. And he actually takes it back to uh, uh, what it meant to be in the hush harbors
Mhm.
back in the day, right? Those spaces where Black people gathered and were really free in a way
Yeah.
that they were not anywhere else. Um, and those are just a few things. Bell Hooks comes to mind immediately. Brandon comes to mind immediately.
And Conscious, I think you had a book I saw you holding.
Oh yeah, I went in. I'm reading this one right now. It's called "Ejaculate Responsibly." A whole new way
Okay.
to think about abortion. It's by Gabrielle Blair. It's
Nice.
like 100, I don't know, 25 like random facts about like men and about how men impact like why we should ejaculate responsibly and why men should be a part of the conversation and why we should be like thinking about it. You know what I'm saying? The first one, just to give you a little sneak peek, is men are 50 times more fertile than women. That's number one. They got like it's like a few. It's a real easy read. You know what I'm saying? I haven't gotten through it yet. And then I
Mhm.
got some Patricia Hill Collins books about intersectionality that made me think very critically about power and domination, specifically when it comes to policy making, specifically when it comes to how the
Yes.
policy making system is
Mhm.
dominated by men, and most of their policy that restricts. You see, I'm going with this. That's
Yeah.
that's where I got. She got one. Intersectionality is a critical social theory and a few other ones. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to
Oh yeah.
Patricia. That's how I got up in there.
And I would just add my favorite book, Killing the Black Body, Dorothy Roberts right here. And,
Yes.
Stolen Woman, which is a Gail Wyatt. That's a book that, great foundation. And then there's others that we will share, but I don't want to run out of time. And I got so many more questions. Okay, let's get to this Christian theocracy. So this is the ideology that uses this sort of narrow patriarchal faith to control policy. And, Reverend Slack, you stand at this intersection of faith and justice. How have you seen this play out? And what does it, like, if we wanted to practice resistance, like, what would that look like for us to do that?
Right. I mean, often this gets played out, right, and really how acts of violence are perpetuated against people who seek care of particular kinds, healthcare workers, and how that violence gets perpetuated in the name of God, right? Like that is often how we see that played out. And in many, I think it gets played out just relative to spiritual violence, right? And it gets played out in in this scarcity thinking, right? It gets back to something I think I said earlier that you all may not have heard. For people who are Christian identified, I think it matters that there's some clarity, right? That right wing ideologies and fascist regimes don't make up the fullness of what Christianity is, right? That is part of how we do that work. That's part of how we dismantle those understandings. Is we have to have a public, we have to have a public, unequivocal voice as faithful people that these particular ideologies aren't the end all, aren't the first and last word on who we get to be as faithful people, right? Um, and to do that, these folks they have a whole agenda that they are playing out, right? They are following a playbook that is not new, and so it's up to us to create our own and to be unafraid and unapologetic in how we show up as faithful people. That is the big way to do that. One of the things that we did as Unitarian Universalists, we have a big general session that happens every summer. In fact, it just happened a few weeks ago, and I believe it was last year in 2024 where we ultimately voted to say that it is actually an act of faith to embrace trans people in their fullness,
Wow.
right? Like that's a big deal, and it actually gives us the authority in all sorts of spaces to support and fight for the rights of trans and non-binary people. Like those are the kinds of things that you have to do. That's a very public statement. It is an act of faith to I think it was maybe 96% or something like that of the delegates voted in support of this. Um, and we have to be ready. We have to be ready for the fight that's going to come, right? And that's the other piece. Like, how are you readying yourself? How are we readying ourselves as individuals and as larger communities to really fight this fight? This is a fight. This isn't conjecture. This isn't. We're just going to have a healthy or unhealthy conversation about it. People's lives are at stake.
Right.
People's lives are at stake. And so, what are you prepared to risk in a public setting to make it clear about who you are and what you believe? You have to be willing, and you have to be ready, right? And we can't do it alone. We have to do it in community. So part of that work is finding your people, right? And being aware of what it is we need to be out in the world, supporting the people who need us, and being ready for the ones who again might not be like us in many ways, but we're invested in your well-being because you're human,
Yeah.
whatever
Thanks.
your gender is.
Wow, thanks for that. That's a great way of just showing how you're holding space, especially for LGBTQI folks. Conscious, you talked at the very beginning about how you've built your whole platform on sitting at the intersection of race, gender, and culture. How are you using your voice to bring reproductive justice into these spaces where it's often left out?
Bridging this question to what Michael was just talking about, I think that white Christian nationalism has appealed to a lot of people in our community in ways that they're not able to decipher what
That's right.
is not white Christian nationalism versus what is. And I feel like as a result, a lot of them view reproductive justice, reproductive freedom, any one of the buzzwords you want to use as just mere like a left-wing liberal propaganda, or sometimes even like demonic. They might even start evoking the devil on you. You know what I'm saying? I think that the intersections between how right now we're at this like white fascist authoritarian like Christian nationalist type point now in our country, where we're able to pervert different values around, you know what I'm saying, Christianity, where it's like, oh Lord, man, you know, that's somebody that's very, you know what I'm saying, critical of, you know, Christianity and all, you know, Abrahamic religions. I still can decipher, you know what I'm saying, when somebody's moving in bad faith, or decipher, you know what I'm saying, when I feel like somebody is being purposely deceptive. And for me and my platform, it's all about being able to teach individuals how to articulate themselves and speak truth to power. I'm hoping to give individuals language to be able to talk about their reality, and maybe be able to use descriptors that maybe they wasn't familiar with, you know what I'm saying, or be able to say things that maybe they've wanted to say, but they haven't figured out the language to kind of put together for it. I know when it comes to reproductive freedom uniquely right now, to me, is really being able to think about different communities and ideologies, whether we're thinking about like feminism or we're thinking about critical race theory, and how something like reproductive justice has been used to fuse the pathology and or it being negative. You know what I'm saying? So it's like genocide equals you killing babies. Like not genocide equals Sudan or Palestine or, you know what I'm saying, these other countries. Is like now we're gonna couch genocide in a narrative about abortion, a narrative about reproductive freedom. And if you saying reproductive freedom, you really mean kill babies. You see what I'm saying? That is a dominant narrative. To me, as somebody that's trying to create counter narratives, is trying to think about how can I, with persistence, you know what I'm saying, and also with, I feel like, substance, with research, be able to counter this narrative that's really right now is so popular. You know what I mean? So for me, it's just about every day trying to learn new ways and new things that the world is, you know, for lack of better terms, fucked up. Sorry. You know what I'm saying? And trying to learn better ways to try to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like understand how I'm implicated in them, but also better ways to how to resist them. You know what I mean? And for me right now, it's just, there is a lot of money being taken away from Medicaid, from Medicare, from cancer research, from HIV research, from DEI, from all that, to be able to trump up, no pun intended, mass deportation. So it's a lot of black folks right now that's moving and hurt. You feel me? Still hurt, we still pissed off, we still mad that Kamala Harris took the L the way she took it. And as a result, we're being very vengeful to different communities, and we totalizing it the way that white supremacy does us. Where we take the worst example of black people and we make all black people be responsible for that worst example. Right now, the black community, I would argue, not the whole black community, but you know who you are. If you mad about what I'm saying, I'm talking to you. You know what I'm saying? You have taken the worst example of the immigrant community, particularly the Latino community. And what this we're saying, y'all know that immigrants is more Latinos, right? We can identify that immigrants come from more than Latino backgrounds. Well, that's very important to acknowledge. But also, you know what I'm saying, we're saying that it's like, hey, man, why is you champion mass immigration, mass deportation, while they stealing your health care? They stealing your Medicaid and Medicare and giving it to ICE agents. And you think it's cool to you to be like, yeah, we sitting this one out. This is what y'all get. Ha, we told y'all. It's like, do you not know that like Haitians and Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and Nigerians and Ghanaians, they exist?
Exactly.
It was just forever and dancing the Afro beats, and now all of a sudden we, man, I digress though. I digress.
This is what they do. This is what they do, though. This is what they do. The work is to divide us, right? And to put us in our little corners so that we don't actually understand the severity of the work that is needed, so that we don't understand what other people need. And it puts us in puts people in a position not to care, right? I don't have to care about this, that, or the other thing because it doesn't actually affect me. Well, no, but it actually does. And so I appreciate people I appreciate the educators, right, whose work it is to really help shift minds and hearts. It really makes a difference. And you know,
I have to say this. This is why our organization is called In Our Own Voice, because we, you know, when we had the listener should do some research on this. You know, there were some billboards that went up in, you know, Georgia and New York that said the most dangerous place for a child is in the womb of a black woman. You know, I'm messing up the actual quote, but it was really a whole
Oh
thing
my God.
against
Wow.
genocide.
Oh my
You know, and so they use the black faith community to say, you know, this is wrong. You shouldn't have abortions or whatever. And we actually did polling and we did the research, and it comes out, and it has for the last 10 years overwhelmingly that regardless of your age, your gender, or your religion, we believe as a people that you know, we prefer and believe that bodily autonomy is more important. And so we created in our own voice because we were tired of being on the defensive, tired of having other people speak for us, and to say, these are our values, this is what we need, and these are, if you're going to represent us, this is, you know, what we want to see in people who are actually going to try to help us better our community. So
Right.
I'm so glad that you're bringing this up, because this is the challenge that we have to continue to fight against these narratives that
Right.
are louder and probably and always better funded and
Yes.
always not representative of us.
Right.
Um,
But I think it's really, really important too to remind people that this work doesn't have to happen in really big ways all the time.
Nah, definitely.
Right? Like it takes like one interaction at a time can help shift some of this narrative.
mhm.
Right? One interaction at a time. I was just it's ridiculous, right? It's the silliest thing in the world. But I was at Disneyland with my kid, with my 9-year-old, and I had an interaction with this dude who was like, "Wait, you're wearing mouse ears?" Because it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. But it's like, why wouldn't I? My kid asked me to.
Right.
And he was like, "Well,
It's not
guys
manly,
don't
Michael.
guys don't do that." And I was like, "Son, this is not hard." You- right? Like you get to be your whole self. Like he was so pained
Because he probably wanted to wear them, and it was
because he wanted to
conflicted.
wear exactly. I was like, you know
He's
what?
hideous.
I think you need to go to that store over there and get yourself some mouse ears and have yourself a good time because this is
Right.
about joy and
Mm-hmm.
fun and supporting your kid who I know you're here with because I can see them.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
This interaction was 5 minutes, but you know what? I watched him walk into that store. I'm like, friend, this stuff isn't hard, but it starts at that level.
Wow.
At that
Conscious,
level, like ridiculous, but worth it.
yeah. Conscious, I think you were trying to say something.
I think that's the relationship that I feel like socialized. I feel like at a very young age, you know what I'm saying? A lot of cisgender men are socialized at a very young age to already be in opposition to like happiness and joy.
Yes.
And also, I feel like why the hashtag, remember a few years ago, it was like hashtag masculinity so fragile.
Mm-hmm.
I think that now, because we talk about being sassy and being zesty and all this, so you know what I'm saying? To me, I feel like now everybody plays into the perpetuation of like fragile masculinity, where you see that it's individuals that like inside the group and from an outside the group perspective don't want to be seen in certain ways. So they put themselves in a little bitty box where you can't even wear mouse ears.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You got whole black fathers that's deciding to put a smile on their daughter's face and wear a tutu. And instead of them talking about the presence and the intimacy of a father being there for their dad, for their daughter and doing what they asking, showing communication, they'd rather berate, pathologize, talk down on, you feel me? Like, man, doing this gay, this, that, and this, that, and this, that, and that. And it's like, this is the reason why I feel like for us men, the men loneliness epidemic is because of us in many different instances. Like a lot of dudes care more about being accepted by other men than they care about being in community. And as a result, you're lonely.
Right. That's right.
All right. We got only 5 minutes. So let me get to this last question. Just
Regina.
really gonna get to this, right? So we often hear this phrase, protect Black women, right? What does that actually look like in, with regard to like, you talked about it with relationship, but like organizing and empower structure. So like, what would that look like for Black men in particular to do that in their everyday lives? And what should the accountability look like or sound like?
I think it's about thinking. I think it's about how you contribute to a climate and how you create a climate that is either conducive for Black women or how that, you know what I'm saying, environment is counterintuitive to Black women. I don't think there's really an in between. I feel like the women that you surround yourself with, around yourself by, I think that how they respond to you matters, but I also think outside of that, because a lot of us, I feel like a lot of straight men typically think about treating women good and well when we're attracted to them. So if we think that you ugly and not attractive, we don't care about treating you good. So to me, it's thinking about even in those interactions where you don't find a woman attractive, how do you treat her? You see what I'm saying? But also to me, it's like, hey, like to me, I said white folks, it's easy to be like Black Lives Matter. Is you willing to put Black folks in, you know what I'm saying, positions of leadership and really pay us by labor? To me, it's like it's easy to say respect Black women. But is, you know what I'm saying, are you willing to put a Black woman in a position of power and pay her for her labor? And to me, that's where I sit at me personally, as somebody with a platform, as somebody that, you know what I'm saying, contracts and consults and, you know what I'm saying, employs Black women. Is like, do I pay you fair, equitably, you know, from what I'm asking you? You know what I'm saying? And do you feel like you have the voice to tell me, no, I don't want that. I don't like that. I disagree with that. And to me, I feel like on a day-to-day, if I'm giving women around me that feel like they had a space to always be able to tell me what they tell me, because I ain't perfect. You see what I'm saying? I'm a step in. I'm gonna be all over the place sometimes. You see what I'm saying? Can you tell me I'm all over the place without me being going off about it? And to me, I feel like that's how you do it. But also just being able to make space. And like Mykal said, something very, very, very important. No one want to shut up.
Yeah. That's right.
Don't want to be quiet.
For me, it gets back to, like, you can't know somebody's experience without knowing them. And protecting, respecting Black women it begins with not waiting, not waiting for somebody to tell you what they need. Like, ask some questions, show some investment. Like, what is it? What is it that makes life stressful or hard for you right now? For the people in your life, for the people you know, right? How can I show up better for you? What does that look like and mean? Um, plugging in, plugging into local movements, to more national movements, and just being willing to trust Black women. Like, this is what I need from you, and being willing to do those things. Like, that's where it begins. Our
Reverend
voices,
Slack.
our voices are everywhere,
Yeah,
everywhere. How do we shift that?
yeah. You said a word with that. Trust Black women.
Trust Black
Reverend Slack, conscious, thank you both for your truth, your vulnerability, the work you're doing to shift culture and to help us reclaim justice. Before I close, can you tell folks how they can follow you and support your work?
Yeah, you can follow me at the Conscious League on all social media platforms. My website is right there, theconsciousleague.com. I do a lot of workshops, facilitations. I do a lot of keynote speaking. If you have a dry, stale curriculum and you're looking to lively it up and add some flavor, holla at me. That is what I specialize in: curriculum development and being able to make it where the lessons come alive and engage the students. Right now, we have a lot of funding and a lot of energy being taken out of education. I think it is up to us in different ways to really fuel how people in our community is educated. Notice I said fuel people in the community and not fuel the institutions themselves. Not saying that our kids don't need those institutions, but saying I'm starting with in the community, man. My motto is education is elevation. I really appreciate y'all, and thank you for Regina for having me.
Absolutely. For me, I'm always invested in building community and being in community with Black people who share the values of love, justice, and liberation. Right. So, if that's you, I want to invite folks to come and spend some time with Blue. Right. Look up Black Lives of UU online. You'll find us all over the place. We worship together once a month online. We were worshiping in a Zoom room before the pandemic started. Like, we started doing that in 2017. We gather every month. It is beautiful time. We try to gather in person whenever we can. It matters right now more than any other time, I think, for us to be in community, for us to connect with one another deeply, to understand what our needs are, to just share space. Like folks are trying to keep us away from each other, right? And to weaken us in that way. And I'm really about building community. So definitely join Blue, whatever your faith tradition is, right? It doesn't that matters not. What matters is that you're invested in being in community, with love, justice, and liberation at the center. So check us out. I also do a lot of facilitated work in congregations, around radical welcome and culture shift. And so I want to encourage folks to look up Transforming Hearts Collective. We do a lot of work in churches, specifically around sort of shifting culture to be spaces that are more open and more welcoming to all people. So check us out. It's good
Thank
to be
you.
here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both. So, today's conversation reminded us that reproductive justice is more, it's not just about policy, it's about choosing liberation over dominance, care over control, and healing over harm. Unfortunately, we've got to leave. But before we go, I wanted both Reverend Slack and Conscious talked about bell hooks. So I'm going to leave you with a quote by bell hooks. She said, "The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. It is violence to themselves." So if we're serious about justice, we must also be serious about healing. And that starts with the harm that patriarchy has done to all of us. All of us. Join us next month, Wednesday, August 20th at 3:00, right back here for another powerful Outspoken discussion on our new Reproductive Justice Community Guide. You all do not want to miss this. We're going to be continuing to be joined by some amazing guests like L. Joy Williams, who's the president of the Brooklyn NAACP. You don't want to miss us. And then if you want to revisit this conversation and catch other past episodes, I want to let you know that Outspoken is now available as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, and more. Just search Outspoken with Dr. Regina Davis Moss and be sure to subscribe, because I'm telling you, it's only going to get better. You know what? My time is short, so I'll just end by saying we'll see you next time. And until then, stay bold, stay grounded, and as always, stay outspoken.
In a time when our rights and our lives are under attack, we need bold truths and trusted voices leading the way. Outspoken with Regina brings policy, power, and purpose together, uncensored, unfiltered, and unapologetic. Now streaming wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, subscribe, and speak truth with us. This is Outspoken with Regina, and we're just getting started.